So my name is Jensen Harris, and I'm a lead program manager in the Microsoft Office user experience team. And on behalf of the product team, some of whom are in attendance over in that corner over there in the blue shirts, I'm very excited to have you here and to welcome you to the first, as it turns out, of the sessions of PDC. The keynote's still going on, right? The Office 12 user experience, as somebody who went to the keynote this morning might have seen, has been something that is a fairly monumental task, and we're very excited to be able to start sharing it with you today. So just so I'm totally clear about what this session is about, there are actually two parts to the sort of Office UI track. The talk that I'm going to be giving here is your opportunity to sit back as an end user and also as a developer and see lots of demos, learn about all of the components of the user experience, not just what you saw this morning, but that in depth plus the additional pieces of the user experience. But this is not the session where eventually I'm going to get to showing you how to build the add-in that you saw this morning, for instance. This is really the overall experience for you to sort of learn and see what's possible with the user experience. There is a session at 2:45 today in room 402 AB in which Savraj Danyal is going to really show you in depth, the XML that makes it happen. So if you're coming here with the expectation of eventually seeing code on the screen as opposed to cool demos, then you're also welcome to walk out now or at any time. I don't want to be upfront with you. I know this is a developer conference, but we made sure that we named the session something very complicated so that if you need to write down the session names and justify to your boss why you were here, there you go. So the agenda today, I'm going to walk you through some of the thinking that we went through about why change the UI of Office, why improve the user experience. I'm going to show you all the different components of the user experience in detail. And mostly it's going to be just a lot of demos, a lot of opportunity for me to show you what's possible with the UI to get you thinking about how to develop applications for Office and or for Windows that take advantage of some of this new user experience. So I hope it's a fun session, and I hope that you're probably going to get to see some crashes. Those should be fun. Expect that, but feel free to laugh anyway when you see them. With that, how many of you were at the keynote this morning and have seen some of this? The majority of you, great. So we really think of Office 12 as being more than just like a user interface, but a new way of interacting with the applications. And when we sat down more than 2 years ago to sort of see what we might do in this area, we talked to people about what were the problems that they had with Office. And overall, a lot of people are fairly satisfied with Office and feel like they can get a few things done very well with Office. But everyone wants the product to be easier to use. And one of the ways that people perceive end user sort of easiness is through efficiency. Like if I can get something done faster, if I can find a new way to get something done, then I am able to use my time more effectively. We also know that one of the common things that people have said about Office over the years is that it has more features than I can find. I only know how to use 5 or 10 things, yet every release we build a feature set based on the things you guys all tell us that you need, and we work hard, we put it in the product, and then people continue using those same 10 features that they knew 15 years ago. So we wanted to make it possible for you guys to find the things that you need to get your work done faster. And we also wanted to support the creation of beautiful, better-looking documents. And you'll see some examples of that as we go. But to help you see the path that we've traveled on as part of the Office user experience, I want to take you to the old Museum of Office Past. starting with Word for Windows 1.0, a version that came out when I was 12 years old. And as you can see, it was a product designed for 640 by 480. And really what you're seeing is the full UI of the product. It had 2 toolbars. It had a very small number of commands, as Chris Capicella said this morning. And as a result, it was pretty easy to use. By the time we move forward to Word 2.0 in 1992, you'll see that the top-level menu structure is already set exactly as it is today in Word 2003. Right? This is 13 years in shipping time and probably 15 years in development time of total stability. File, edit, view, insert, format table, tools table, window, help. That's what the product looked like in 1992. By Word 6.0, we started getting through the cycle of adding features and adding features. You can see we jumped from 2 toolbars to 8 toolbars. We've added right-click menus. So the UI was getting more and more complicated, but it was probably still pretty usable. And now we reach the Windows 95 era, right? And this, although it turns out that there was not a huge number of features added to Word 95, there was one feature which everyone says they couldn't live without, which is red squiggle underlining. And today, often people say, everything I needed in Office was in Office 95. Now, I don't believe that that's actually true. There are people that like to save documents as HTML, or they need SharePoint integration. But there were a lot of the core of Office was frozen in Word 95. By Word 97, you can see the number of user interface additions to the product has increased exponentially. Office 97 introduced command bars, which is a way of turning menus and toolbars into one object. So this is the first release in which you can move menus to the side and float them everywhere and tear off menus. Of course, we added hierarchical multi-level menus for the first time in this release, so that's flyout menus. And of course, the beloved Clippy Office Assistant. So now, the turn of the millennium, Word 2000. By now we're up to 23 individual toolbars. And this was a release where we started to deal with some of the feedback that we were getting and some of the stories in the press that said, Office is too complicated to use. There's just too much in Office. And so Word 2000 introduced interface innovations that were designed to deal with that. So one of the most perhaps hated versions of this was the long and short menu, right? So now we're going to hide half of the menu items for you. And if you click the chevron or wait long enough, the rest of them will show up. Well, this decreased how complex the product looked, but in reality, it's just as complicated to find the thing that you're looking for. Also, we introduced rafted toolbars, which means 2 toolbars were now on one line. And what that meant was in order to find a lot of the buttons where you knew where they were before, you had to use this fly-off to get to them. So there were a lot of innovations that were tried in Word 2000 to make it more possible to find the things that you're looking for within the framework of menus and toolbars. So now we reach the land after time, as I like to call it, task panes. Task panes were our first attempt to say, actually, menus and toolbars don't work anymore, right? What we'll do instead is we'll create, instead of creating new features as menus and as toolbars, we'll make a whole new rectangle for ourselves, and all the new features we'll just start putting in that rectangle. All the old features we'll keep in the menus and in the toolbars. And of course, Clippy's still down there. So by the time we got to today's modern day Word, there are many, many places to look for the thousands of commands in Office. Word now has 31 toolbars. Each one of those is chock full of 16 by 16 unlabeled icons. We've got a huge number of task panes. We've got 1,000 menu items. And as you can see, in this next, so this was one of the things that is interesting about the Office UI today is when you look at it on the back of the box, it looks like this. And when we go do site visits and look at what Office ends up looking like on people's machines, especially people who are not experts, well, it ends up looking more like this. It's very cluttered. Toolbars have come up and people don't know how to make them go away. The menu bar sometimes gets dragged down off the top of the screen altogether and ends up floating or on the left. And people don't have any idea how to fix this a lot of times. So if I show you just this, you can see that this is just top-level menu items in Word, that the number of things you can do with Word has actually increased steadily. And the number of toolbars has increased about the same rate. Each one of those toolbars represents anywhere from 10 to 30 commands. So you can see as soon as we introduced task panes, well, that started up on its way too. And by the time we looked at starting what we now call Office 12, we said, my God, by Word 12, we're going to have 70 task panes. And the next version, we're going to have 200. And it became clear to us that we needed to do something. So one of the questions that people have always asked me when we've talked about a new user experience is, I like menus and toolbars. Why are you telling me that they're bad now? We've learned all these years that they're good and now they're bad. Well, they're not bad. Menus and toolbars were just designed for an age in which software did less various, different kinds of things, less total number of things. And really, for a number of releases, the feature set of Office has just stretched that absolutely to the limit. And as a result, we find that people are frustrated. They know that there must be a better way of doing something, but they don't know what it is. And worse, they don't even know where to start looking, right? If I want to find a command in Office today, or piece of functionality, I don't know where it is, where do I start? Do I look through all of the menus from left to right, and then bring up all the 30 toolbars, and then look through the 25 or 30 task panes? Like, how do I even start doing that? How do I know whether something is in the product or isn't in the product? You can see in the Word 1.0 time frame, you didn't have that problem, right? Menus only had 5 things on them. There were only 2 toolbars, and there were only 6 menus. There were only 7 menus. This was not, this was when menus and toolbars were designed. This was the kind of scope that the founding fathers of Word imagined. So we knew we wanted to do something, and we just had to figure out, well, what was the right thing to do? And when we talked to people that used Office, one concept, and this is something that you can use in your own applications because I don't think it's true for just Office. One concept really resonated with people that if they felt this concept, then they liked using the program. And that was something we call the sense of mastery, which is if people feel like they understand the program, if people feel like they mastered it, that they know where things are, and they know how to use them, then they love using the program. If they're confused, well, at best it's a tool that they have to use. And maybe they've got some index cards taped up next to the monitor showing them how to do a mail merge or something, right? So sense of mastery meant for us essentially these 4 things. The first one was a finite space to search for functionality. We know that people don't know the thousands of things you can do with Office or the 1,000 things you can do in Word. But we wanted to give them a logical way to explore the functionality and to know when they're done looking. Secondly, it turns out that a huge number of the commands in Office are contextual. There are hundreds of things you can do to a picture. Not one of those things, however, can you do if you don't have a picture in your document. There are hundreds of things you can do to add drawings to your documents, to format those drawings and group them and all those things. But not a single one of them can be done if you don't have a drawing. So by contextualizing the experience, we knew that we could drastically simplify things. One of the pieces of feedback that you guys have given us time and time again is that we've been intrusive sometimes with the UI that we've built. That we pop things up without asking, hello, it looks like you're writing a letter, and all the variants of that. But also that we're just not predictable. Like sometimes toolbars come up and sometimes they don't. And sometimes Clippy wants to help, and sometimes he doesn't. And there's no way of really gauging, that the level of interference that we put in front of you. So what we really wanted to do was to say, your document is the most important thing on the screen. We're going to help you work without interference. That was one of our goals. And last, we wanted to think back to what we think of as like the founding fathers of Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and not try to cancel out any of the great work that we've done over the years, but to say, if we had redesigned Word now in 2005, knowing how it turned out, knowing how much functionality was going to be in it, what would we build? And that brings me to Office 12. So I'm going to bring up Microsoft Word, and now you may be seeing for the first time that you are having trouble seeing what's on the screen. You're welcome to move at this point as well. So one of the first things that I want to impress is that although the UI looks very different, there's a lot of things that are the same. So how many of you have heard of SQIM, or the Customer Experience Improvement Program? You've seen that dialogue show up, from time to time? Well, if you've opted into that, you know that this is our way of collecting information about, anonymous information about how people use the product. So we can see what commands do people click on, what commands do they not click on. Turns out there's a very, very steep curve where 90% of the command, or excuse me, a small number of commands account for 90% of the overall clicks. So if you look at what we call the first tab of Word, which is the right tab here, you'll see that there's a lot that is, very, very similar to how you would use Office 2003. I can type a title here. Well, let's just make this a title to make this easier. All right, I can select text. I can come up here and use the bold button. I can, make it bigger. I can choose from, the font. I could underline it. I could center it. It turns out that this first tab of Word is actually about 90% of all the clicks people do in Word. That the simple formatting stuff is really at the soul of Word. And so a lot of the reaction around how hard is it going to be for people to switch to this new UI, we hope some of it is ameliorated by the fact that you can get in and be productive immediately. So as I switch through the main tabs of Word, you can see that there's an Insert tab. And Insert is the place to add functionality to your document, put pictures and headers and footers and things like that. Page layout is really the place where you can change how things work on the page. So you can add line numbers to the page, you can change the margins, the paper orientation, things like that. References, this is a place to add endnotes and footnotes and all of your academic and long document type materials. If I switch to Excel, well, the top level tabs aren't the same. And this is one of the places where we've made a jump from what we did in Office 2003, which is to say that while consistency is good, right, like where it makes sense to be consistent, we should be, homogeneity isn't. And Excel is at its heart a number crunching program. Word is a word processor, and PowerPoint is a presentation program. So we've allowed the sets of tabs to be different. However, you still have an Insert tab, you still have page layout, because those are things you do in Excel. But you have a Formulas tab in Excel that helps you do all the things to debug your formulas and functions in your product. And you have a Data tab that's about getting things in and out of Excel. And similarly in PowerPoint, you'd see, we've got animations, and we've got slide designs, and we've got the things that make PowerPoint a powerful presentation and drawing program. So one of the first things, before I dig into each of these little pieces in a great deal of detail, is to realize that not everything has changed, right? We have the information to know how people use the products, the commands they use the most. We've tried really hard to locate those together, right? So we hope that you'll be able to get this when you get Beta 1 and be productive on the first day. So here are all the components of the new user experience. You've heard a lot about the ribbon, and I'm going to show you a lot about the details of how it works. But I want you to know there's a lot more than just the ribbon. And I'm going to show you each of those things in detail. But the new user experience is about a collection of UI designed together to work together to make Office easier to use. So the ribbon, starting with the most obvious thing, is the replacement for menus and toolbars, and also in some ways the replacement for task panes. We move the UI into a single place. Every command in the product is in the ribbon. There's no other place to look. There's no other toolbars to bring up. There's no other task panes full of commands to bring up. This is it. It's in the ribbon or it's not there at all. And we designed it around easy browsing, which means you can click on the left tab, move to the right tab, clicking across them or scrolling the mouse wheel. And if you don't see it in there, then it's not in the product. That's it. Simple. You're done. It's either in the product or it's not in the product. So the ribbon, each tab is organized into what we call a chunk. And as you'll see in the second part of this presentation, chunks are the level at which you add your content to the ribbon. So a chunk is in some ways just a collection of controls. And the ribbon can actually host a richer set of controls than menus and toolbars can. It can host, push buttons, but also galleries, dialog box content, as I'll show you in a second. Okay, so let's look at Excel, for instance. So one of the things that you saw this morning was that you can take a set of numbers like this, and we can go into this conditional menu here, and we can visualize these as a 3-color gradient. So before I click on this, what this is here is essentially a big button drop-down that has what we call sort of a large menu or a gallery. This is not showing you a list of just selections, but it's sort of like a slightly better version of a menu, but not a full-fledged gallery. If you click on it, you can see that it applies this. And this is a pretty cool feature. And you saw that I could do the same thing here with data bar. So you might think that conditional formatting is sort of a strange thing to put on the first tab of Excel. But it turns out that a lot of what people do with Excel is analyze data. That there's sort of the part of Excel which is enter the numbers, and there's a part of it which is analyze those numbers. And by co-locating that, it helps more people find these rich features and find them and use them that wouldn't normally stumble upon them if they were tucked off into some other part of the product. So it really made sense to rethink of Excel in terms of the whole way that you use it, not just one specific scenario. So another component of the ribbon that is important is how it allows you to do a complicated thing in one step. We think of this as results-oriented design, and I'll talk about that later. But here's just a bunch of numbers that we typed in for sort of a fake set of stores and their sales figures. And one thing that people really like to do is be able to sort and filter that and set up the formatting such that you could read the numbers more easily. And we thought it was cool just to create a command that was sort of called format as table. It shows you some different ways that this thing could look. And I say whether it has headers or not. And we do all of the formatting for you behind the scenes. We apply all of the features that are necessary to make this work. And as you see, I can format it in different ways. I can, this red one sort of shows it nicely. I can turn off the banding of the rows. I can easily add a total row. We've done a lot of things to apply this behind the scenes without having to know Excel well enough to know what features would have made this work in Excel 2003. Just sort of, you're an expert immediately. So, looking at the ribbon in depth, so each of these is a chunk, as you can see here. And there are different kinds of content in chunks, as I mentioned. So here are some small buttons next to a big button. One of the things that's interesting about the ribbon is that it can host rich layouts. So it's not just a 2D thing, it's actually, or it's not just a 1D thing like a strip of buttons. It's actually 2D. So we can show you the commands that are more important and the commands that are less important and the groupings of them. you can see that we can also host things that we would have hosted in dialog boxes before. So if you've ever wanted to turn off the grid lines in Excel, or want to turn off these headers to get more space for your document, we can do that right inside of the product. These are other examples of sort of dialog box content. We can also host these very big buttons that show the drop-down galleries that, that call attention to themselves. So the screen resolution right here is 1024 by 768. And one of the things that people ask about often is, well, what about if I'm at less than 1024 by 768? How does it scale down? So I'll show you sort of how that works. So if I grab the right end here, and you watch as I start to bring the window down, the first thing that you'll see that happens is that the page setup thing, I'm just dragging this back and forth, changes from big buttons to a set of small buttons. So each of the chunks knows how to make itself smaller in a series of steps or bigger in a series of steps. We've tried to label as many things as possible when there's room, because we know through extensive usability that people are way more able to find commands when they're labeled as opposed to when they're just 16 by 16 buttons. As I continue to scale this down, you'll see that the next thing that happens in this particular tab is that some commands lose their text over here. And of course, we can define how this all works. And then as I shrink it down even more, you'll see that these two chunks, arrange and sheet options, have turned into a different set of, a different kind of thing. This is what we call a pop-up chunk, and it's another way we have of scaling the tab down. At the point at which, for instance, sheet options turns into a pop-up chunk, the whole chunk itself turns into a button. But as opposed to just being a menu that would just show a flat list of commands, we actually show the chunk exactly the same way that we would if you had a bigger monitor. So I can pop this down and turn the grid line on, turn the grid line off, just like it would look like if I were here. And if I keep dragging this down, you'll see eventually most of them will turn into pop-up chunks. Now I'm at, I think, 350 pixels across, smaller than you probably would use. But even if you keep dragging it down further, eventually you couldn't have used the commands much anyway because the window is so small. So we move it to a mode where it's just about seeing the data and copying and pasting it into other places. The ribbon actually disappears. So you've seen how we move from 1024 downward. But a lot of you probably have monitors that are bigger than 1024. And one of the interesting things about the ribbon is it's one of the first UIs that we've designed at Microsoft that scales up, not just down. So we don't build it for 1024 and then shrink it down. If I had more screen real estate, if I had 1400 across, I could continue to unroll commands, see more things in galleries. We take advantage of monitors as they get bigger. So we don't do the thing that we did with menus where, in Word 1.0, the top level menus took the whole screen, and now they're just a little piece off to the left. So the ribbon is sort of intelligently able to scale down, scale up. Okay, so let me show you really quickly just a couple of things that you can do with the ribbon that you may not have known that was even possible in Word, and show you how easy it is to make a sort of cool-looking document. So I've got this sort of stock text about Australia here, and first thing I'm going to do is close this out and open it again. And now I'm going to add a header. And this is a gallery of headers that have been put together because we know the kinds of headers that people often create. They've got the document title or the page number. And I see one here that I kind of like, and so I'm just going to stick this in. Now, you might not have any idea how to create this thing in Word, and I don't know that I do from scratch either. But I don't need to know how, right? It's put a place for me to type the document title here, and it's automatically put the page numbers in for me, as you can see on each page. So there's a header that I've just created without sort of knowing what I'm going to do. And I think this thing, because it's going to be a brochure, would actually look better if I set wide margins. So again, I can try that out. I can see whether I'd like narrow or normal better, but I think wide looks pretty good. And now that it's wide, I can fit more text in if I change the orientation to landscape. Let me zoom this down a little bit so we can see what's here. And now that it's in landscape, I can probably afford to move the text into 2 columns. So I click on columns, and I move things into 2 columns. I could have also used a brochure layout like that. I think the 2-column thing looks pretty good. And now I want to add a little quote off to the side. So I'm going to look through my list of pull quotes here, and this one looks pretty good. And this is going to put a place for me to just come in here and type in, any quote that I want. And I actually want to format this. That one looks kind of stylish. So I'll put this in. And this isn't done yet. So I want to mark this whole document as confidential so that people know that they're not to distribute it to anyone. So I'll go into the page layout and add a watermark. And we've got a cool set of, do not copy or draft or confidential or urgent. You can create your own. But in this case, I'll just add the default confidential. And as you can see on each page, it's put a watermark confidential behind it that'll print. And the last thing that I'll do here is I need a cover page onto this so that I can type my name, and I can choose from a list of pre-made cover pages, as you see, that I can just go through and type in the document title, type in my name, etc. So that's an example of how I can turn a little bit of text into something really, really rich in just about 60 seconds. Like, I don't have to know how any of these features work. I just sort of pick, click, get the result that I'm looking for. So that's one of the ways that we think the ribbon makes using Office more productive and makes you more efficient, and helps you create more beautiful things. Okay. So one of the things that you may have noticed is that it doesn't seem like there are that many tabs in Word, right? Each of the apps only has 6 tabs. So where is all the functionality gone? So as I mentioned, most of the commands in Office only work in conjunction with an object. And there's lots of kinds of objects. And so the way in which the ribbon deals with these contextual tools is through something we call contextual tools. And what that means is whenever I insert an object or select it, the tools for that object show up in the ribbon. So the way this looks, let's do some PowerPoint. Okay, so here's just sort of empty deck. And the simplest version of this is just inserting a shape. And in this case, let's pick no smoking. Seems like a good one. No smoking here at PDC. So I'll draw that in. As you can see that I've drawn it in, the ribbon has changed. And it's brought up the shape tools, of which the shape tools have one tab. It could have multiple tabs, as you'll see as we continue. So insert an object, the contextual tab comes up. That's because we want people to see the different things that they can do with the object. So at this point, I can, see, no smoking is usually red. So let's make this red. I could, make it a little bit 3D, whatever I'm going to do with it. Okay. So now I click away from the object, and you can see that the tools go away. I no longer have the object in scope, so the contextual tools go away. If I click back on the object, then they'll come back down. Now, let me change slides to a different slide and show you that normally, then, if I have an object and click on it, the tabs, this is not an insert, this is an object I already have. The tabs come down, but we don't automatically switch to them. And that's because you could be using any of the rest of the commands in the ribbon at this point. So we don't want to, automatically take you there and sort of lose. The only time we take you there automatically is when you insert an object. But I can double click it, bring it down. Or if it's just sort of in range, and I click it again, I switch tabs and switch back. It works just like any other tab. I can click on it, I can click, between it, etc. So contextual tabs are our way of scaling down functionality to work with a specific object. And it does two things. So you can see it drastically simplifies PowerPoint. It has a much smaller set of core commands. And it means that when you are using a shape, we're not forced to put it in a teeny little toolbar down at the bottom. We now can afford the full space of the ribbon to show you all the different things that you can do to make your drawing good. Okay, so one of the first questions that everyone asks is, what happens if there are multiple objects in scope? Okay, so here's some, a chart that we've made of grades for a specific class. So you can see I have a table down here. If I click in it, the table tools reveal themselves. I can click along here to get different table styles, etc. That's kind of, our first crash. Ooh. Okay. However, yay, it's recovering my documents. Thank you, Word. Okay. Let's open this again. Okay. So we've got another table up here. And what I'm going to do is, because the overall assessment of these pitiful grades is that they're bad. So I'm going to draw a bad arrow in here. I'm going to draw a down arrow in the table. I'm going to draw it here. And I also need to set the text wrapping in line so that I can actually just drag it in here. And of course, we'll make it red just so it's bad. So now I've got a shape inside of the table. And as you can see, both sets of contextual tabs are now available. I have the word shape tools, and I have the word table tools available. And I can use either one. I can still use this gallery. I can switch over here, and I can change the formatting of the table, or I can change the shading of it. Go back here and change this. If I click over here to bring the arrow out of range, the shape tools are no longer there. If I click there, they come back. If I were to move this shape out of the table, then the table tools go away. So it's a pretty simple model. But it's powerful in that it lets us drastically simplify the user experience of the product and help you be more productive using the tools that matter at the point at which they matter. When they don't matter, they're out of your way. So galleries. You've heard a lot about galleries, and the kind of gallery that we've been showing you so far has mostly been sort of a simple gallery of like, here are some cool, different visual styles we put together that help you format something well. And that's a really important piece of the gallery idea. It provides a visual way of browsing functionality. And one of the ways that we've started to rethink the product in Office is to not think about providing commands anymore, but providing results. Like, instead of giving you 5 or 6 new commands to learn, what are you trying to achieve? What's the result you're trying to achieve? And is there some way we can just show you the result ahead of time? So galleries are really our way of helping to show results instead of commands. And as I showed a little bit earlier, it makes it possible to be an expert at using the product without actually being an expert in knowing how it works. So there's 2 types of galleries, and you've seen both of them by now. One of them is an in-ribbon gallery, which means that we take up space in the ribbon to show you the gallery. The other kind is a drop-down. So a really important way of thinking about galleries is, we found in the usability lab that people do what over and over again what we call 3-stage formatting, which is they look for an overall style to apply to an object, and then they tweak it, but still using galleries. So this is like I've given you an overall table style, and then secondly, I've given you a style of header rows or footer rows, and you tweak those next, and then you drill down into the real core formatting if you need to tweak something. So we've tried to make it possible to do 3-stage formatting throughout all of our objects. But the other important part of galleries is not just visual styles. It's that we can actually show other kinds of features that in the past had just been dialog boxes or totally non-visual features as this results-oriented kind of gallery. An example that you've seen a couple times today is the margins gallery. That in the past, this had been 4 spinner controls within a dialog box hidden within page setup, and it had been hard to see the results as you were using it. Well, we know that it turns out through the data that we have that 95% of the time people are changing the margins is to change them from 1.25 to 1 or 1.25 to 2. So why not put all of these choices in here along with the MRU and let you deal with it just like any other result? And so that's sort of the paradigm shift that we're trying to capture more and more in Office. And an important piece of that is live preview. So an even better thing than saying when you click on a command we apply it is just by hovering over something, we can show you what it's going to look like without destroying your document, without making you apply it, undo it, try it again, apply it, undo it. Live Preview stops that repetitive cycle. We've tried to put Live Preview into every single place that we can think about it in Office. And you'll see that it's when you use the product, you can't imagine not having it once that you've used it. It's so useful, and it's responsive, and it feels really good. So I'll show you sort of how that works. So let's go back to this Australia document that I had. And I'm going to spruce this up a little bit in a different way. And I'm going to insert a picture of a koala. So as expected, the picture tools show up. And one of the picture tools that we have available is something in the arrange chunk called position. So if in Word 2003 I had wanted to take that picture and move it to the upper right-hand corner and have the text flow around it, I'd have to use 4 separate commands located in different parts of the product to achieve that. I'd have to get the text wrapping right. I'd have to get the location right. I would have to change it from inline with text to be with the text flowing around it. So we thought this was a good example of some place where the result someone wants is just I want the picture in the upper right-hand corner. Why can't we make it possible, as you can see I'm getting Live Preview here, to just say put it in the upper right-hand corner, and Word takes care of all the rest. Thank you. That's a good example of thinking about a gallery in terms of not just being visual styles, but actually, the result that you're trying to get to. And similarly, I can easily add a border, find the one that looks the best with this particular koala. I can, change the color of it. I can add a shadow to it. I can do all of these things without actually knowing the properties that I'm tweaking behind the scenes to make this work. I just sort of choose how it should work, and it does. It also, of course, works with very simple things, like I can take this text, and I can, as you saw, change all of the fonts of it. I can change the size of it. I can change the color of it. One of the things that you can see is that we remove the selection while we're doing it so that you don't get the weird thing that you get today in Word, which is you're trying to apply a color, yet you've selected the text. So what you're actually getting is the inverse. Here we remove the selection, and then once you apply the color, we put it back for you. So Live Preview is just something that you start to rely on as just, it's there, it's helping you get your work done, and you can see what it looks like before you even choose it. It turns out it's even useful in some places like, I've got this stupid little shopping list that I set up here, and I'm going to turn these into a bolded list. And it turns out that Word has all these different bullet styles that I can use, and I can define my own. It also has all these numbering schemes. It turned out that before, the only way I ever knew how to get anything like that was I would type 1, 2, 3. I had no idea Word had this entire numbering feature. But we can present these to you. You can see what they're going to look like ahead of time, and I click it, and we just insert it. So Live Preview just becomes a really important part of how you use the product, and you just discover things constantly that you didn't know were there that help you make better things. So I talked a little bit about 3-stage formatting, and I'm going to show what that looks like with charts. So here's just some dumb data that we typed in. It's just like any kind of data that you might have in Excel. And I'm going to select it, and I'm going to choose Insert Chart. And in this case, I'm going to choose this stacked chart here. Now, the first thing, let me make this bigger so you can see what's going on. The first thing I would sort of have you notice, which is implicit in Office 12, is without doing any work at all, you get a better looking thing. And this is not even as good as it's supposed to look, but if you've used charts in Excel recently, or if you haven't used them in 10 years, you'd find that the designs haven't changed in those 10 years, right? They're still written for like the EGA palette that we had, in 1992. So we want to help you make more beautiful looking documents. And by default, if you don't do anything, you get something that's great. But then, of course, we provide you a large number of styles. And these aren't final styles. We're still playing with the capabilities of the graphics engine. But you can see I can click on some different ones here and get some different kinds of effects. that, that look kind of cool. So that's the first stage, which is I can just choose from a wide variety of styles. Well, of course, it's not just styles, right? Because we talked about results-oriented design applying to things other than styles. So we also provide a lot of common layouts. So I may see that this is more like the thing that I actually wanted, and click on that. And we go apply all the properties behind the scenes to make this kind of chart possible. I don't have to know the like 15 different checkboxes I would have to check to make this work. So that's the first stage. Use our galleries and you'll get great looking results. However, if I want more power, I can move to the second stage, which is tweaking the individual elements. So in this case, the legend isn't helping very much. So I'm going to turn that off to get more room for the chart. And these lines are kind of distracting, let's say. So I'm going to say turn off the horizontal axis, and I'm going to turn off the grid lines as well. So there we've provided galleries that let you tweak, still without having to go to some dialog box and toggle a bunch of properties, but let you do the common things that you want. Move the title to the left, move the axis to the top, turn on the grid lines, turn off the grid lines. And then finally, if I'm the ultimate, type A personality, and I want total control over everything, of course you still have it. And I can even, choose one of these pieces. I don't know, this blue piece down here, for instance. And I can say, make this piece black, right? I can still tweak all the individual elements of it. So you can see that the three stages are really designed to let you decide how much power you want. And no matter how much time you have to fiddle with your charts, you should get great looking results that make people say, wow, how did you make that thing? And so that's where we think the power of live preview and galleries and results-oriented design all come together to let you make something that looks great without any work. And before I close this, because I know this is going to be a crash, I'm going to switch to the pie down here. And I'll show you the pie really quick. So we made some data that looks cool in a pie chart because pie chart is one of the ones that the team is working really hard on making cool. And you can see this is a pretty cool looking pie chart, and it's got some other cool things. So the story behind this, if I click on this at all, it's going to crash. I can try to show a couple different designs here. And there's a bug here with showing the wrong contextual tabs, but there's some cool designs. They're not showing up in here. Let's see how many of these I get before it decides that I shouldn't use it anymore. There we go. So there's the pie chart demo. It's very cool. We're going to have great looking pie charts. It turns out that if you let me take a 30-second departure, to get this pie chart, I was actually, it turned out, for a totally different reason, in Australia for 2 weeks up until yesterday. And the build that I had when I left couldn't make this cool looking pie chart. So my colleague Clay, who's sitting over there, I had told him to send a CD to me of the build in Australia. And we were worried that somehow the CD wouldn't get to me or get lost in the mail. So we wanted to use a kind of encryption or a kind of way of making sure that, I'm going to offend some people in here perhaps, but what we thought was if we wrote the word Dixie Chicks on the CD, that even if someone happened to intercept it, that no one would put it in the CD player, they'd just throw it away. Seemed like a funny idea. I have nothing against the Dixie Chicks. It was just, haha, we draw a flower on it, and we know that probably the set of people that loves Dixie Chicks and who would like to install a beta build of Office 12 is very small. So that was cool, and I went off to Australia, and I come back, and I hear that Clay had gone to the FedEx Kinko's in Capitol Hill in Seattle, sort of red-faced, and he said, with this Dixie Chick CD, said, I need to get this to Australia as fast as possible, whatever the price. And the woman's like, well, what is it? And it's like this homemade CD that has a flower drawn on it that says Dixie Chicks. And the woman says, you want to send the Dixie Chicks CD that's worth $10 to Australia for $80 in 2 days? And so it turned out that there was a lot of customs paperwork around figuring out which CD of the Dixie Chicks was worth less than 14 Australian dollars. And so we didn't have to pay excise tax. The whole thing ended up being a big waste of money and time on everyone's part so that you could see this pie chart, which then crashed. So the last, and of course, while telling the story, I should have done whatever it was going to do to finish crashing. So why that does its thing. The last thing that we use galleries for is to make the sort of getting started experience more rich. And the place that I'm going to show that is one of the apps that we haven't shown so far, which is Microsoft Access. So if I boot Access, Access is actually the app that has probably done the most work to change and really improve the user experience of it. And you can see that they've provided a gallery of databases that you can just use that are like templates, an issues tracking database, a contacts list, assets. But one of the cool things about this is they actually have created a way that you can create your own templates and your own categories and apply, set up all the metadata for this so that someone using Access can actually get your category, can get it, in this case this happens to be Microsoft Asset Tracking app, and you can set these up so that anyone using Access can set this. So I'm actually going to bring up what that thing would look like if I had created it. And as you can see, Access has done a lot of work to look more like a combination of Excel and Outlook. It's very, very powerful. But they also use the ribbon, and for the same kinds of operations. So here's this asset list of all these different computers that is selected over here in my list of all the different tables that I have and things. And I'm going to click Insert Simple Report. And what a simple report does is creates a good-looking report just out of the box that actually turns out to be very configurable. You can see it shows up like it's in a piece of paper. I can actually click one of these and hit delete. I can move the fields around between here. There's contextual tabs that let you change the layout of these fields. So the getting started experience is something that is in the other apps that ends up looking more like a set of different templates that you can use and things like that. But Access has really sort of done a lot of work to make it so they've embraced in a database kind of way a lot of what live preview and contextual tabs mean to them. So I'm going to talk about customization right now. So customization, thank you. So the main means of customization in Office 12 is something that we call the Quick Access Toolbar. It turns out when we look at our data that a relatively small set of users customize anything. We don't have a way of telling how much of it is accidental and how much of it is not. But it's at a very single-digit percent. It's very low. It's a lot less than we thought. And we hope by identifying a lot of the common customizations. For instance, in PowerPoint, it turns out that a huge number of the customizations are just adding send to back to a toolbar somewhere or adding it to a menu. So we've tried to actually, or adding superscript in Word to the formatting toolbar so you can do a superscript. We've already tried to integrate those into the ribbon. But if you want to customize, the Quick Access Toolbar is the way. And you can include any command anywhere in the ribbon in the Quick Access Toolbar. And it has two modes, compact and full size. And I'll just show you how this works now. Okay, so let's go back to this svelte document. So this up here is what we call the Quick Access Toolbar. As you can see, these commands are available no matter where I am, anywhere in the product. And we start by pre-populating it with save, undo, and redo, because those are things that you could want from anywhere that you are. But let's say that because of the way that you use Word, you want bold up here. Well, all you do is simply right-click on bold and add it to the quick. access toolbar. You can do more than that, though. You can actually add, let's say, a gallery. So if I want to add margins to this, I can add margins. I get a small version of it, but it's actually the full gallery up in this area. Another thing that I could add is individual commands from different menus. So if let's see if I can find an example. If I use draw table a lot, even though this is in a menu, I can right-click this and choose Add to Quick Launch Toolbar, and it will add that there. If I add so many of these that what I really want is a lot of space for it, I can actually toggle it to be a long toolbar down here to get as much space as I want. And one of the capabilities of the ribbon is that you can click the selected tab to close it, which means that you can actually create your own UI using this. Of course, you could, if you put just the few commands that you need up in here, then you can bring the UI down to something that's even smaller than you could ever do in Office 2003. If I decide that I don't want these commands here, I can right-click to remove them, sort of a right-click to add, right-click to remove. Or if I want the full-blown customization, etc., of course, we have all of the commands everywhere in Office, and you can add and remove them, add them to document templates and things like that. So that's the main way that customization works. Of course, there is extensibility that allows you to add things within tabs and chunks, and that's what's going to be talked about in part 2. So one of the questions that gets asked is, what happens to dialog boxes? And it turns out the dialog boxes are pretty good for for providing advanced functionality. And we've kept dialog boxes around in the new UI, and they remain the way to get to that advanced functionality. But one of the problems that we saw with the way we did dialogues in the past was that if you knew where a button was, let's say bold, well, there's also a format font dialog. And just because you knew where bold was didn't mean that you knew where the dialog that hosted bold was. There was a total disconnect between those two things. So we created this thing called a dialog launcher. And really what a dialog launcher is a formalization of the relationship between basic and advanced functionality. So if there's a chunk in the ribbon that contains font formatting and also a dialog that is about advanced font formatting, the dialog launcher from that chunk leads to that dialog. Similarly, if there's a gallery that has the chart, there's a chart dialog somewhere where you can tweak millions of little settings. At the bottom of the gallery, we have the dialog launcher that takes you to that dialog. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's Word's first tab, and the example that I had been showing is this font functionality here. You see in the upper right-hand corner this little plus here. This is the dialog launcher to the font dialog. And if I click on this, you see it brings up the font dialog just like you'd expect. You can see there's a one-to-one relationship between the things that are in here and the things that are in here. Similarly, the clipboard here can bring up the Office clipboard. The paragraph can bring up the paragraph dialog. Any place there's a dialog in the product that we kept around that has advanced functionality, we map it to a chunk so that you have the basic functionality and you have the advanced functionality. There's no other way to get to dialog boxes besides the ribbon, right? There's no secondary menu structure or anything like that. So dialog launchers are simply the convenient mapping of chunk to dialog. So as I talked about at the outset, one of the major goals that we had was improving efficiency. And not just through the customer experience improvement program do we know what kind of commands people use and how often. We also know how they use them, which commands they use through the menus, which ones they use through the keyboard. And one of the things that we found out was that there's a lot of users who don't use the keyboard at all. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you the new keyboard model for the UI. But for a minute, we're going to talk about mouse users. And what we invented to help improve their efficiency is something that we call floaty. Now, how many of you have seen some piece of on-object UI in Office, like a little square or a little like paste recovery, or right? There's a lot of them, little pieces of on-object, what we call on-object UI, that pop up, around text. And one of the things about on-object UI is that we've always used it to try to advertise features that you're not using, right? We've always said, hey, you may want to use this autocorrect thing, or hey, you may want to use this paste thing. What we thought was, what if we used, instead on Object UI, to use the 8 commands that you're clicking on 95% of the time while you're using Word. So Floaty is really our means of efficient access to the most common commands in the app for mouse users. So that's not my demo. This is my demo. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to take this text here and make it bold. So as I select this and let go, you'll see that a little ghosted thing showed up above the cursor. This is something that's called Floaty. As I move towards it, you can see that it fades in to reveal a toolbar of the most common commands in Word. It turns out that this accounts for something like 85 to 90% of all the clicks in Word. And now instead of going to the top, they're right next to your mouse. So I can come in here and use, bold, italic. I can make this go up. I can, center it. I can do this. So then how do I dismiss it? Well, I just move the mouse away from it, and it goes away, right? So let's say that Floaty came up, but I'm not planning on actually using it. Well, do anything other than go love it, and it goes away, right? So Floaty comes up on selection. You move towards it if you want it. If you don't, you just move your mouse away from a little bit, and it goes away. So Floaty is, and in every app it's a little different. In Excel, you do different commands. In PowerPoint, you do different commands. But each app has its own Floaty. Of course, if you don't want it at all, you can turn it off. But some of the time, if I'm really in a mode of just writing and writing and writing, I'll turn this off, and I'll do my writing, and I'll just use, Floaty all the time. If I don't like the on-object, or if I don't like the this behavior where it comes up on selection, I can also select, and if I right-click on this text, you see that every context menu also has Floaty on it. And so then if I use the Floaty part of this menu, it stays away. It stays around so that I can do multiple things to it. And then it behaves the same way as normal Floaty in that if I move away, it fades away. So there's lots there to love if you're a mouse user that we think will help you be a lot more productive. So now we have all this new UI. And it turns out that there are all these new features that people didn't know existed. Well, how do we figure out what the features, how does someone figure out what features to use and when they're supposed to use them and how to use them? Today's story for help is just there's a search box. And if you see a command that you're interested in, hope you remember what the name of that command is and hope you type in the magic words to get the right help article to show up. The new way of doing this is something that we call super tooltips. And super tooltips are what build a bridge between the functionality in the product and the help system. So if I go into Excel, it brought back my pie chart. Thanks, Excel. And I'll switch to the formulas tab here. Now there are a bunch of features in Excel around formula auditing that you may not know how to use. You wouldn't be alone. I didn't know how to use them either before this release. And so one of the things that you can see as I hover over different features is that this thing called a super tooltip comes up after a couple seconds. And the super tooltip is not just the keyboard shortcut in the name. It gives you a little sense of you want to use this feature if you're trying to do X. So in the example of named ranges in Excel, you can see that you could replace a range of cells with a name. We can also host pictures. So the picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if you want to trace precedence, there's no number of words that we can do that can explain that as well as showing you that we're going to show an arrow between a value and the value that it impacts. Similarly, in Word, if I have a table, and I don't know what a banded column is, for instance, that's a bad example. because we don't have that one built yet. You go away. Okay. I do believe we have it built in here, where we can show you what a banded column is. As you hover over it, you can see, oh, it's going to turn on and off the banding of the different rows and columns. We also, you may have seen this when I was showing dialog launchers, have the ability to show you what the dialog looks like before you actually click on it. This is another way of sort of doing live preview, which is you can see what the thing looks like before you're actually in there. And I neglected to show, actually, as long as we're sitting around in PowerPoint, of course I can get the different live previews here, which is cool, and I can get the different live previews here that you'd expect. I neglected to show you my favorite live preview in the entire product, which if you close your eyes, you can see that live preview is not just for visuals, it's also for sound. So not sure why we built that, but something like that, I guess. So moving on to keyboard access. Oh, the last thing I'll say about super tooltips, you might have noticed some of them say press F1 for help at the bottom. Eventually, anytime you have a super tooltip up, once we've gotten everything built out and we ship the product, you'll be able to press F1 while you're hovering over that command, and we'll bring up exactly the right help article for that command. So when I said bridging the gap between the command and help, that's what I mean. Right? You don't have to know the magic words. You just press F1 whenever the tooltip's up, and we'll take you just right to the right place. So, as I said, most people use the mouse a lot in Office 2003. We know power users love the keyboard. And so we have a 3-tiered keyboard access model. So the first, what I call tier, or kind of keyboard access, is the control keys. Control plus S, Control O, Control P. None of these have changed. You can use every one of them exactly as you could in the past. There's no reason for them to change. So those stay the same. The second one is that we've introduced a new keyboard access model to using the ribbon. And this is something that we call key tips. And it's actually a way in which we've made every single command in the product keyboard accessible. And I'm going to show what that looks like. So let's go back to our trusty thing here. And I'm going to press Alt. And you may need to be really close to the projector to see this. But as I do, you can see that little key tips, little squares with letters in them, showed up in front of each of the commands, or in front of each of the chunks and in front of each of the tabs. So you can see I can press, E, I. I have the wrong kind of keyboard here. That's okay. I could press E to go to right. I could press I to go to the Insert tab. I could press D to go to the References tab. I happen to be a Dvorak keyboard user, not QWERTY, so I'm going to switch over to my laptop here to do this. If then you can see the font chunk here has the letter O. If I push O, then each of the commands within that chunk get a set of key tips. So I could press B to enact bold. I can also, this allows me to provide access to even things that are in menus. So let me select a piece of text here, and I'm going to put a border around it. So I'm going to choose Alt, then I'm going to do G for the paragraph text. Sorry, I did the wrong thing there. Alt, G, E for borders, and you can see even the menus, and we don't have these fully built yet, have key tips for everything that's in a menu. And this created a border around this text. So basically, this menu, this way of using the keyboard shortcut is just like playing Hansel and Gretel chasing the bread through the forest. I don't know if that's the same fairy tale. But the one where they drop the bread, that's what this is like. You push Alt, then you just follow the letters to get done. And on average, it'll take about the same number of keyboard strokes as navigating the menus. Now, of course, you couldn't navigate the toolbars at all, except in a very offhanded way that involves Shift and F12 and a bunch of things like that in Office 2003. So this is a big win. However, if you're the person who can do all the keyboard shortcuts absolutely in your sleep and it would kill you to change them, we allow you to turn on the third type of keyboard access, which is full compatibility with the old keyboard model. Now, this doesn't bring menus and toolbars back, but allows you to navigate the phantom menu structure. So you can push Alt, F, S, I, T, whatever you knew to get to whatever command you want, and we'll use it just as if the menus were there. So if you can do the keyboard shortcuts in your sleep, then you turn this on, and you'll continue to be as productive with the keyboard until you decide to learn the new model. So those are the three ways that we do keyboard access. So winding down, one of the last parts of the UI is what we call the enhanced window frame, which contains the read-on status bar, view and window switching, as well as zoom. There's a couple cool things here. So one of them, if there are any journalists in the audience, you can see that we have read on the status bar, and one of the things we've done is taken out all the three-letter acronyms like OVR and EXT or whatever was down there, and replaced it with things like word count and things that, so as you type, we have an updated word count. But this is totally customizable. So if you're the person who wants to know the line number, or I want to know the column that I'm in, or the vertical page position, I can add all those things to the status bar. The status bar in all the apps is totally user customizable now. We also have view switching over here, as well as zoom. You can see that you saw this morning the zoom is very responsive. Once you have this thing, you can't stop using it, zooming in and out. And I'll show you this document that we got. Boo. Okay. Called government spending. And this lists some amount of expenditure for all these different government agencies. And as you see, as I scroll out, it's quite a big spreadsheet. And one of the cool things that Excel does as I get down to 10% is if you have named ranges in your document, you can actually see that it puts the named range over the thing. So I can go down here, find the thing I'm looking for, like this red box here, and then I can zoom in on it and go right to the box where I am. So it's just like having the ability to zoom in and out on things, find what you're looking for, zoom out, see what the page looks like, has proven to be really cool. And of course, as was mentioned this morning, Excel has this cool page layout view that shows you exactly how your billions of pages of government expenditures are going to look on the printed page. So that's the enhanced window frame, which is the status bar, view switching, and zoom. Context menus, I'm not going to do a big demo of here. I showed that there's two major things that we've added to them. And one of those is floaty integration, so that as you right-click, we always have the floaty at the top of it. The other piece, which I'll show really quickly, is just that it also has what we call gallery integration, which means that if I'm back to my shopping list, in the past, if I'm back to my shopping list, okay, Excel's fighting with Word. Go away. This is the most crashes you're going to see in any presentation this week, I'm sure of it, but that's okay because we're not at beta 1 yet. Okay. So here's my shopping list. Thank you. Okay, so in the past, and there's a lot of weird things that are right now on the context menu that aren't going to be there. But in the past, we had used context menus as mostly a way of launching dialog boxes. Like you'd go to bullets and numbering dialog box from here. Where there are galleries that are replacing those dialog boxes, that integration is right in the context menu. So I can use the same bullet library, the same things like that right inside the context menu. Besides that, context menus are something that we have kept relatively the same. We continue to try to make sure that the right things are on the context menus. But one very special menu, which was called this morning the file menu, we also sometimes call it the application menu, is the new place in Office where we showcase functionality that's not about the insertion point, it's not about making the document, but about distributing the whole document or sending the document or saving the document. It's about the entire document. And it also showcases functionality that's part of the application itself, not just about formatting the document. So example of this, if I click down in Word, the menu that's marked File, and of course it has all the access keys on. Oh, thanks. You'll see that along the right side here, we have an expanded, most recently used list. You can make this go up to 100 documents. I think by default, we've got 20 or 25 in there. I can just click on any of these to open my most recently used documents. And I can also click on any of these things over here on the left. So I can do new, open, save, save as. But where there are extra commands, extra rich commands available in the same vein as the command you're using. For instance, I can do save as, but I could also do save as another format, save as read-only, save it to a document management server. Those things show up over here on the right. So wherever there's additional functionality available, and we're continuing to flesh this out, you'll see it right next to the basic command that you know, email, print, things like that. So this is sort of the hub for the app and all the things that you can do with the app and collaborate on with the app. It also hosts the application options and where you quit the app. And you'll see the options in a second. Because, man, do we have a lot of options in Office, right? Like, putting up this dialog is almost like passé. We've done it so many times. Like, man, we're sorry, there's so many things here, but, you know, gee whiz, what can we say? It's options. But who even knows what most of these do? It turned out that not only do you not know what they do, but a lot of us at Microsoft don't know what they do. And some of them, we literally found no code hooked up to them. Some of them really don't do anything. A very small number, but some of them don't. So we really wanted to, as part of this new user experience, start over with a clean slate and say we can do better than this. And so what we've done is moved all of the options from a product into one place. Right? We've started over with global and document settings being moved together. And we've introduced super tooltips to help you see what the thing is. But the last thing that we've done is something that we call expert mode. And it probably is what it seems. It turns out that most of the settings in the application are not things that most people could ever figure out or use. Maybe there's a reason for them to be there. Maybe your organization uses policy to roll them out. But those things were keeping people from finding very simple options that frequently showed up on our list of top 10 wanted features for Word. Right? We'd get like, number one feature is like turn on this checkbox that you couldn't find because it was with 60 other features. So expert mode is our way of trying to separate the features which are really preferences, meaning a user preference, from hardcore settings. So let me show you the new application settings dialog. This is what you see by default. The first page of this is, all the things that you can do to stay up to date. We'll let you know of security, issues or patches in here. But the rest of these are very simple preferences. So, ignore words in uppercase. You can click through these and see that where there are more advanced preferences that we still think people will need, we've put super tooltips here. So you can hover over the question mark and see like, oh, what does this thing do? Where it makes sense, we've tried to show you like, what are the formatting marks that I'm turning on or off, so you can see what those look like. So you can see this looks pretty much simplified. For instance, look at the compatibility thing here. I want you to remember what this looks like in a second. So this is all the options that we have about compatibility. And the things that we have in there right now that most people might need are, for instance, use the Office 2003 keyboard accelerators, or save by default as Word 2003. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on expert mode. And right now that requires a restart of the dialog. And now all of the additional options, the expert mode ones, are still shown in the same place they would have been, except in green. So everything that is in green here is an added setting. And if I go into compatibility here, this is the same dialog you saw before, with pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of settings that are all settings that were in Word before. Things like, balance SBSCS characters and DBCS characters, treat / as ::. I mean, someone uses these, but most people don't. And so we've kept them in expert mode. So we're really trying in our products to think about the difference between preferences that users change and settings that are there for expert users and administrators. And by redoing the options here, we've really tried to make that balance. So before we finish up, and I'll stay and answer questions as long as anyone likes, but I know the questions that we get asked most often. Number one is, which programs get the new UI? Well, you can see the list, and this is not because we think that the other programs shouldn't have the new UI or it's not appropriate for them. We've chosen to start in the apps that we thought could benefit most from it and that needed the refresh and that most people use. Honestly, when we look at data, these are the apps that most people use. They're the apps that are in Office Pro. But moving forward, this is not a one-release process. We're going to get feedback. We're going to continue to refine the UI just like we did over the last 15 years. We really look at this UI as building us runway for you guys and us to build functionality on top of Office. So this is really sort of the first piece. Is there a classic mode? Can I go back to the menus and toolbars? No. As I mentioned, you can get back to the old keyboard shortcuts. But when we sat down and thought about what a classic mode for Office 12 would look like, well, it turns out we have it. It's Office 2003, right? We're not trying to design features that old way anymore. We don't know how to build the new kind of features we build this time in the old model. That's why we waited to this time to build it. So classic mode does exist. It's the way Office suites used to work, and it's Office 2003. And it's a kick-butt great program. But moving forward, this is the model that we think is going to allow us to help people create their best work. And last, of course, is the UI extensible? Of course, it's broadly extensible. And as you saw this morning, you can create great add-ins and easier using a declarative XML model that will be outlined in the part 2 of this session. So in summary, we hope that this will help you find the right feature, be more efficient, and create powerful, beautiful documents, and that once you start using it, you won't be able to go back. And over the next couple months, I'm going to be blogging extensively on my blog. You can see the website here. You're welcome to send me email as well. But if you want to talk in person or you want to converse on my blog, as I'll be detailing some of this, you're welcome to visit that as well. And that's it. So thanks very much for coming. If you'd like to stay for questions and answers, there are 2 microphones on the left side and the right side, and you're welcome to stand there and ask questions. If not, enjoy the rest of PDC, and thanks for coming.
Can you talk about programmability in Office 12 as far as macros other than Visto?
Well, the next session, which is outlined here, is going to go into extensive information about that. Basically, though, as far as Office goes, any macros that you have or add-ins that you have today will continue to work without code change in Office 12. And so Raj will show what that looks like. Basically, if you create menus or toolbars, those things will be turned into menus or toolbars in the new app. They'll be put inside an add-ins tab. And if you want to take advantage of the new UI, you need to change your add-in to upgrade it to use the new UI. But if you have legacy add-ins, every one of them will work without changing it. It's just your decision when you want to upgrade it to take advantage of the new functionality.
Is there any discussion of making the new UI elements available to ISVs, to developers?
We're looking into that. We definitely believe in having other programs take on this model. That's something that we're looking at, and we may have an announcement as we get closer to shipping Office.
Okay, so no definitive plans there yet?
Not right now, but stay tuned.
Okay, thanks.
I can take one more question, and then I need to wrap it up over there.
Does the task pane still exist, specifically the document actions that Visto uses?
Yes, the programmable task pane is there. It's actually improved significantly in Office 12. You can put your own content in it, and that is something where there are a number of people here who can talk to you about it. But it's there. It's still there, and it's better in Office 12. So.
And one other question:
yes.
List templates. Is there any improvement to those? I know there's a lot of problems with list templates as far as getting rid of them once you've created them if they're a nuisance, that sort of thing.
Yes, there's a new template model throughout Office, and what you want to do is attend one of the sessions about the new XML file format in Office, and they'll
Yeah.
talk about that.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you all.